Welcome back to panel discussion 2. We are so delighted to have a few guests joining us for the panel discussion today. Today's topic is implementing changes in assessment, and we have invited experts from several universities across Asia to share with us. May we kindly remind all of you to submit any questions you have to the Q&A box in Zoom or use the raise hand function during the Q&A session. So without further ado, let us introduce the panel chair and speakers. Sitting in the panel are Professor Chetwyn Chan, today's panel chair and Associate Vice President, Learning and Teaching from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Professor Ruay-Shiung, President from National Taipei University of Business. Dr. Albert CHAU, Vice President, Teaching and Learning from Hong Kong Baptist University. And Professor Erle Chuen-Hian Lim, Vice Provost, Teaching Innovation and Quality from National University of Singapore. Panel speakers will each share their views, later followed by an open floor discussion. So let's not wait any longer. Our panel chair, Professor Chetwyn Chan, will give an introduction on today's topic. Professor Chan, please.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and welcome all of you attending today's session. Today's session is on assessment. To kick off this session, I just want to show you 2 slides. It's just introduction. Now, in front of you that you can see all these very familiar terms, such as summative assessment, formative assessment, and other approaches that we use in our daily assessment for our students. So things like norm referenced versus criterion referenced. I think nowadays less and less using norm, but more criterion, and then maybe standard referenced. So all these are familiar terms. We call these conventional views. Next slide, please. Now, we put in a lot of effort debating and also deliberating on the use of different assessment methods. From the slide here, you can see the different assessment methods we can use the level of learning or the different learning outcomes to categorizing them, and at the bottom, we set objective tests such as exams, such as MCQ, then most probably is for testing, remembering, citing, identifying, recognizing, versus at the top of the table, things like portfolio, reflective writing, and extended projects that's supposed to tap on the higher level outcomes such as creating, constructing, reflecting, planning, and integrating. Now, we put in a lot of effort to design all these different methods. And most of these methods, it can be done either face-to-face, such as under objective testing, or such as discussion, to portfolio reflective writing that it doesn't involve a face-to-face. So in the past, it seems that face-to-face or non-face-to-face, actually it is the decisions to be made by teachers. But I would think nowadays, the challenges that we face is not a matter of choice, but it's a matter of change. Now, next slide, please. So in the rest of the session, we have 3 distinguished speakers, and actually they are introduced by Tilly just earlier on. And these speakers will address 3 questions: why we need changes in conventional views about assessment in higher education. The 2 slides which I show, those are the conventional views. But why do we need change? And then the second is, has the recent pandemic speeded up the changes? We know higher education is undergoing changes, but what happened in the last year or earlier this year? What are the effects? And then the third is, what will be the new normal? So the speaker is going to imagine to construe a new normal and then to share with you. So without further ado, I'd like to pass to the next speaker, Professor Zhang from National Taipei University of Business to address the issue.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chetwyn, for the introduction. I will talk about assessment in higher education. I am from National Taipei University in Taipei, Taiwan. Next slide. And in our university, or in Taiwan's university, there are two kinds of assessment. I realized that Chuen talked about the student learning outcome assessment. Also, we have teacher teaching effectiveness assessment. This is two different kinds of assessment, but we conducted them in our university. Next slide, please. For the teaching assessment, there are several methods to conduct the teaching assessment. The most commonly used is student evaluation. Usually, we conduct it in the first month after semester begins, such that the teacher can give a preliminary feedback from the students that he can change his teaching content, teaching method, and so on. Also, the student evaluation is conducted at the end of a semester. And those evaluations are done both quantitatively and qualitatively. Also, we evaluate a teacher by peer evaluation by colleagues. That is, all the professors in his or her department can evaluate the teaching of the professor. Also, we can evaluate the teacher by student achievements, whether in school or after graduation. Also, there are other supporting evidences, such as students' test scores or the university ranking, university reputation, and so on. They are all related to the teacher's effectiveness. Next slide, please. And for the student learning assessment, also we have student self-evaluation. Student need to fill in a self-evaluation form for his study. Also, we can see from the credits or the scores earned by the student and the projects accomplished by the students. Also, teacher can give evaluation for the effectiveness of students' learning. Also, we can see from students' achievement, whether in school or after graduation. Also, there are other supporting evidence, such as the students after graduation, their employment rate, or also the university ranking or the reputation. Next slide. And the pandemic affects these two kinds of evaluation because many learning becomes online, and not every teacher can teach effectively online, and not every student can learn effectively online. I see from some online learning blog, there is a parent's voice that said that the online of her daughter's experience would consist largely of watching pre-recorded videos. That is no other teacher and the students' interaction. And also, since a teacher has to face many students, so the teacher took almost a full week to respond to the girl's email question. That is, the interaction is very few and very slow. Next slide. So in this online education, we need live instruction and more opportunities for remote learners to interact with their teachers. But the question is, teachers don't have that much time because there are many students. It is especially difficult for international students across multiple time zones. Next slide. So how assessment can be done in this special time? especially if the online learning becomes normal in the future. Also, there are many technologies that can help. For example, a teacher can use the social media to conduct interaction with the students. Also, there are many instant communication tools, such as Messenger or this kind of tool like Zoom we are using. So the university or a teacher must devise new technologies for teachers to evaluate how the student learning outcome. There is a book called Assessment Strategies for Online Learning. I think we can all learn something from this book. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Albert CHAU.
Thank you, Chetwyn. Thank you, colleagues, for attending this panel. I understand that it is lunchtime for a lot of us, so I'm very grateful to you for giving up your lunchtime to listen to us. Indeed, the organizer gave me two questions. Next slide, please. The first one is that how is the recent pandemic speeding up changes in design and planning of assessment in higher education? Second, what are the challenges and how to resolve them? I cannot answer the second part of the second question, okay? But I will provide some thoughts that my colleagues and I are undergoing, some intellectual journey, okay? So that we can work it out together. Now, next slide, please. With or without COVID-19, I think we have a lot of questions about our assessment. On the left is our traditional examination format. On the right is what students do, or even what we do, okay, in our normal day job setting. When we had to switch to online assessment towards late 2019 because of the social unrest, I talked to students, well, guys, we have to change to online assessment. And then they immediately said, okay, hey, Albert, some of us are going to cheat. Great, okay, so I asked them, how are you going to cheat? We say, we Google. And then I say, I Google every day, okay? I Google a lot when I work. And then, okay, what else? And they say, we will talk to each other. We will communicate with WhatsApp, we will email or whatever. We will work together. And I will say, I work together with my colleagues every day. If I don't know how to complete the task, I pick up my phone, I call Chetwyn, okay? I call Isabella, okay, at CUHK. So whatever they said, they would do to cheat, I ask myself, hey, man, I do it every day. Then why should we consider that as cheating in an examination? I guess for assessment, we have to think about at least three very important issues. The first one is the aim of our assessment. Chetwyn put it forward very early on. Is it for summative purpose, formative purpose, or in more traditional terms, is it just assessment of learning, what students have learned, or assessment for learning? Assessment as a form, as a motive, as a methodology to drive how students learn. Professors do that as well, okay? Whatever the QA, the quality assurance agency asks us to do, we do it, okay? So everything we do downstream would drive us how we learn, how we behave upstream. And then, of course, the second question is what to assess, okay? The process, just the outcome, and then finally, how to assess, whether we use an examination hall, whether we use some group work, so on and so forth. Now, next slide, please. Other than these philosophical issues, we also have changes that are going on all the time. We are talking about diverse pedagogies, experiential learning, internship, so on and so forth. So our assessment methods in good keeping with all these developments in our pedagogies. Exchange degrees, double degrees, we have to talk to other institutions on an academic currency, which is the credit, okay? Your credit is the same as my credit. Your distinction is the same as my distinction. based. Of course, we always think that our distinction is better than other people's distinction. Our course is richer than other people's course. So we have to look at that as well. Are all the outcomes countable and quantifiable? Okay, colleagues have been talking to me, even for our own assessment, teacher assessment, as Professor Chang said, the famous quote is that whatever counts may not be countable. What can be counted may not count. Okay, shall we just do the outcome? If we just do the outcome, how do we provide timely feedback to students? Do we need to look at the process as well? Next slide, please. Now, but COVID-19 indeed has provided us with some opportunities. I have been enjoying this conference a lot since yesterday. I see a lot of very exciting initiatives. Right before this panel, I was listening to a presentation by a Singaporean colleague on how to do virtual experiential learning. Now, so with all these possibilities of learning analytics, okay, Moodle, Zoom, whatever, virtual reality, we can actually access how students learn, say how they access different information, different materials online, how many times they talk to each other. I think all these would give us some new opportunity of logging data as students learn, as students interact, as students complete an assignment or a group project. And then we can look at how they actually achieve the learning outcomes, or even bigger, the graduate attributes, okay? What we want our students to be like by the time they graduate. I think we have better chance of doing it. Say at Hong Kong Baptist University, we brand ourselves as a liberal arts university. We say by students graduate, we want them to have, say, leadership quality. We want them to have a very strong sense of social commitment. But how do we, in a regular course, end of semester assessment, examination, assess that? No way. But I think the learning analytics would offer us a chance. And then the virtual exchange, of course, again, because the students communicate online, we can log, we can have a better idea of how they learn. I think that is very important. Next slide, please. So these days, my colleagues at Baptist University, I know Eva, my colleague, Dr. Eva Wong is here, and her colleague, Dr. Teresa Kwong, and a few of us are thinking very hard on authentic assessment. Not out of context, examination hall, not out of context, lab test. Okay, this is also combined with our experiential learning and service learning projects. For example, in the past, when our students did laboratory tests, they would test chemicals. But these days, they will go to a food bank to get a food which is about to expire. And then they bring the food back to the lab to do the testing, and then they deliver the food to the needy people. So we hope to put everything in context, coupled with experiential learning and service learning. We want to look at not what students know, okay, as if, say, in a Chetwyn's analysis, the low-level analysis, we would like to know what they can do, or even better, what they can create with what they know. That is the liberal arts ethos, okay? Smaller assignments so that there will be more timely feedback. These days, when I was a student, we submitted an essay in the first week of the semester. It was only towards the end of the semester that we heard from the professor of the grade. I don't think we can do that, okay? So if we interact with them in classwork or in smaller projects like essays, fun project, we give them timely feedback. Better alignment with the graduate attributes. With learning analytics, maybe I can see how a student develop as a member of a team. Maybe a student start off being a very quiet person, okay? And then eventually the student would take part in the discussion, in the group project more actively, so on and so forth. So we are also looking into process rubrics, not just outcome, okay? But it won't be easy. how students communicate, how students lead, how students do teamwork, how students correct and learn from the feedback of the teacher. So all these things are what we are trying to do. Next slide, please. Now with COVID-19, indeed a lot of our colleagues are doing very interesting things. In the past, this is a few pictures showing how our visual arts teacher, okay, teaching sculpture. In sculpture, you need to know about how to balance, okay, so that your creation won't fall. So with COVID-19, he was doing this in school and then asked the students to use whatever they have at home to balance objects, okay, and then he will assess accordingly. So these are the things that we are doing. So next slide, please. So we have the recently established an Advanced Study Institute together with Education University in Hong Kong. We have a community of practice. So all the issues that I've talked about are the themes of work of this Advanced Study Institute. So please join us, okay, and then we will work out all these things together. Final slide. Thank you very much, okay.
Thank you, Albert. Now we have our last speaker, Professor Erle Lim from Singapore. So Erle, please.
Thanks, Chetwyn. I was asked by Chetwyn to talk about these 2 points. What will the new normal be when conducting assessments in higher education? And how will the new normal enhance the quality of education in university? Before I start, I'll just make a few comments. One, the question of whether the pandemic has accelerated things within even education, not just assessment. The answer is a resounding yes. I mean, I had conversations with Chetwyn in the last few years where we were talking about how it might be difficult to get people to adopt blended learning, online learning, because there's some resistance and there's a whole bunch of Luddites in any university. And COVID put paid to that. Everybody had to adopt it, no matter what their belief. I would also say that in NUS, although we have been quite good at teaching online, we've been doing online teaching since maybe about 13, 14 years. When it came to online assessments, I realized when I took over this job that I would need to really get the university to accelerate the adoption of online assessment techniques, because even if you look at universities that are doing purely online, or all your MOOC providers, etc., the online assessment component is still considerably weaker. Next slide, please. So, I mean, one of the things that we need to think about in the new normal is that contagion is here to stay. If you look at H1N1, SARS, even Ebola in Africa, you realize that whatever we do, even as we emerge from COVID-19, we are going to see new outbreaks every now and then. SARS was 2013. We're going to keep seeing these pandemics every now and then. And in fact, even as we are planning for the vaccine and thinking about the vaccine as a safe way to live our lives, don't forget that influenza, if you think of the Spanish flu in 1918, how many genetic variations have we seen with the flu? And how many vaccines have we had? I mean, fortunately for us, with over the last 100 years, the influenza vaccine has become a little bit more predictable, and it's easier to design vaccines for the population. But COVID is a new virus, and already we've seen mutations and change. So it is very worrying, and I don't think we can ever see a time when we'll be able to go back to a complete normal, at least without considering the possibility that new outbreaks might push us towards a new form of online education, social distancing, as well as online assessment. Can I have the next slide, please? So, these are actually from our infographics that we send to students and to our teachers. So, no matter what, that even once we go back to a new normal, there will be safety measures that might have to be brought up every now and then, or where we might just need to be prepared with all these contingency SOPs, where we'll need to activate pandemic measures at the slightest notice. So temperature declarations, physical distancing, mask wearing. I think that for NUS at least, we've been very, very careful, even as we've emerged from what we call our circuit breaker, which is basically a lockdown when everything was online. We've now allowed part two, phase two, which is, or phase 2B, where we can even allow a little bit more relaxation of physical distancing, mask wearing measures, etc. Mask wearing is actually still compulsory within Singapore when you go out. Within the house, we don't wear masks, or if you're alone in an office. But other than eating and drinking, you wear a mask throughout the day, which I'm sure is the same in Hong Kong and all over the world. So, such things are going to be compulsory. We have face screens so that if you are speaking in a group, you might even allow yourself to wear a face screen together with your mask, or we have these perspex screens that we stand behind. And in fact, our university is now looking at, for teaching and for assessment purposes, how we can redesign our teaching spaces. Within, even if you allow in-person exams, I think we must always accept that students might actually purposely come into an exam, even if they have fever or symptoms, because they don't want to miss the exam, right? So it's a possibility that you might need to have a hybrid option where online is always there. And don't forget that things like laboratories, clinical examinations for medical schools is very important, and we need to imbue our students with a civic responsibility. Authenticity of exams is something that I've been struggling with, and in fact, we just completed our online and in-person exams for about 28,000 students. So that was something that was very harrowing for me, and it's very important. But one of the things I talk about is, open versus closed book exams, which is how our registrar's office thinks of exams. Don't forget that open book means you can go into a hall in the traditional setting and use your book to read and to, find an answer so that you can amplify or to bring your answer to the higher level. But it's still your own effort. Once it's a remote exam, open book means nothing, because now you can collaborate and cheat WhatsApp, Telegram chats. So we actually were forced to come up with proctoring for the university. Can I have the next slide, please? And in fact, I think that's a very important thing. Now you find that proctoring companies are all coming up, and they're very expensive. And not only are they expensive, but they are also very difficult, because proctoring in exams, what they do is they record it. They use these AI techniques to detect whether your eyes are roving, whether you have any ambient noise in the background, and whether you have, for example, move your body and look downwards or something. But the students find it very difficult to do such exams. And actually, I think that using AI is a way to go. So within our university, we're actually looking at customizing our own solution. For now, though, we've just been using a second device with a Zoom camera, and we're trying to experiment with ways to do screen monitoring during the exam period so that we can see what the students are doing, and we analyze keystrokes, etc., as well as randomization, and as well as a forward-only function. Not only randomization, but also randomization of questions and answers, and even different variables given to students, so that the same exam, you might have different answers, even with the same question. Next slide, please. I think I'm coming to an end. So, don't forget that even with all this advent of online remote teaching or assessment, there are things where you cannot do it remotely. For example, laboratory practicals or clinical examinations, you need that face-to-face, in-person assessment. And so that is something that's very difficult. I just took part in our postgraduate medical exams, where we had patients coming from the same hospital, whereas normally we would have them coming from a different hospital. And we had to go and vary such that the students or the candidates did not know the patients, and the examiners were very stressed because we were wearing masks the whole day and distancing. Next slide, please. So don't also forget that technology fails us. No matter how we want to get the perfect exam, technology will fail you. So we spent weeks going before our exams. I went through every single step with my team And yet little things tripped us up that we could not have envisaged. So thankfully, all the problems were minor, but you'll be amazed at how something like an update to the iOS or an update to the app will cause your exams to fail. So in fact, in one of our exams, students doing an accountancy exam could not cut and paste within Exemplify, which is by ExamSoft, and we had to reconcile that for the students. So it's very frustrating, things that are not your fault, things you've even asked the companies to preempt for you, they don't necessarily do. So my own policy within NUS is that no matter what companies we link up with, I rather customize my own solution so that I have control over it. And where I can't customize it, I will ensure that we work out with the teams, with the companies, how to get immediate access to a resolution if necessary. I think there's one more slide to go. Can I have that, please? So, I mean, in the new normal, don't forget that no matter what, you will still have a redefinition of your learning spaces. You need to think about distancing, even with return to what is a normal. And one more slide, I think. Next slide, please. So don't forget always contingency plans. Don't just think of plan A, but plan B and plan C as well. And make sure that you can activate these plans at a moment's notice. I think I've gone past my time. I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erle, for your presentation. All these are very good and put in new perspectives to the issues. Now, it is now the Q&A session. The instructions is there, and let me see. So press the raise hand button or submit your question in the Q&A box. Now I've got one question in the Q&A box. I read it out for you. There must be teachers and students who are eager to return to all the old normal practice after COVID-19, especially in assessment practice. What can be done to make the good things you talked about, say, stay or even spread? So our dear speaker, you want to respond to this? What can be done to make the good things you talked about stay or even spread?
Chetwyn, I think we're trying to figure out who's supposed to answer the question. Is it meant to be?
All speakers here. So,
Okay.
so basically the question is human beings' mentality, once when COVID-19 is gone, then we'll revert back to old normal instead of the new normal, as what Erle just mentioned. So, so the question is, what can we do in order to keep these momentum going to go toward this new normal, if we think new normal actually is a good thing to do?
Well, maybe I'll give it a try
Yeah,
myself.
Albert.
I'm a psychologist, okay? I pretend I'm a humanistic psychologist.
Good for you.
Yeah, so once people find something is good, and if the environment allows so, people will stick to it, okay? So I think as an administrator, I will try my very best to create the appropriate conditions so that all these good practices can linger on. And then Professor Chen also talked about the teacher assessment. I think we also have to change our staff evaluation form, okay, rather than say promoting final examination in the traditional way. We also promote diverse assessment methods as much as we promote diverse pedagogies.
Thank you, Albert. Any supplement to this response?
Well, I think people can be very versatile. That is, we can adapt to the situation because we cannot predict the future. So what the future will bring, we do not know. But we can be sure that whatever the future will be, we can adapt to it. So even if the pandemic stays, we can still live and survive, I think.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. Now, there's one other question in the Q&A, which I think is quite important and also is real. It's real. It is about talking about now we have been forced to do online teaching. We know that we have to do it. It's not a matter of choice, but it's a matter of survival. Now, what the question wrote about is, but what about the quality? What about the workload? Particularly, this question is about the workload. The workload actually is very heavy for teachers to jump from A to B. That means it's all of a sudden to turn to online teaching. And because of this workload, because of other things, that the quality may not be the best. So could we just comment about this workload thing? And actually, Professor Chan also mentioned about the workload of our teachers. So how are we going to deal with it? And anything that and also the teacher can even say, it's not my issue. I'm here to just teach. If you give me that many hours, I can just use that many hours to produce the materials that I can deliver to students. So anyone who want to speak on this? Teachers' workload.
Chetwyn, can I take it?
Yep, sure, of course. Oh.
So just a couple of things. One, when you do blended learning in any university, what is told to the creators and those who are actually just doing the blended learning course is that you divide the materials into piecemeal portions so that the students can take them in digestible bits. So they recommend that each video vignette is no more than 12 to 14 minutes. They also recommend that just as you divide your modular credits or your effort hours in a class, you must also do that in your online courses. So we actually had to stop our teachers who would take the opportunity, since everything was online and students didn't have to rush around campus anymore. Some of them converted their 2-hour classes to 3-hour classes and 3-hour classes to 4-hour classes. And so we actually had to make a rule because the students were pleading for help, and we enforced it that the teachers were not allowed to go beyond the effort. So just because a normal class of a lecture of 1 hour or 2 hours now goes online, you still must divide the digestible portions to that same effort. So I use blended learning as a way of mandating it. We calculate a course as usually about 30% of video or lectures, and then the remaining 70% should be time to reflect, time to read, time to discuss, time to do some kind of practicum, and then your assessment and exam. So if you use a modular credit type of effort hour calculation, do the same when you do online assessments and teaching. Can I just sort of take the second question, which was about large class online exams, because that's what I've just done.
Sure.
I don't want to monopolize this, so I will shut up after this, I promise. But it's very, very difficult to do online final exams. Don't forget that if you can do face-to-face, face-to-face is always the best, because when you talk about open book, you're still not allowing people to collaborate. And if you do have a collaborative exam, that is fine. But here you're talking about illegal collaboration. So for large online classes, any LMS should be able to handle the exam quizzes. What we did was we forced the teachers to prepare the exams beforehand. And in fact, we set up a system where even up to 3 days before exams, we give them that time. But if 3 days before the exams, you have not uploaded your full exam, we will actually chase you until you have uploaded everything. We made sure the teachers were very aware of how to do the exams. We actually asked them to try out, to do mock exams, including the proctoring and the team's support. So I'm going to talk about this later on in the 3 o'clock session. but basically it's very important to do trial runs to assume that students will cheat even though most of them don't, and that teachers will end up making mistakes. So don't assume that everything is going to go smoothly. Do trial runs, make sure that everyone takes it very, very seriously. We were very lucky in that when cheating occurred, or at least when people were planning to cheat, the classmates would report them to us so that their own efforts were not discounted. And that helped us to prevent cheating in addition to all the measures that we took. So I really am shutting up here.
Thank you, Erle. The question that you address, actually, it also have another part. I forgot whether you addressed it or not, is how to handle if the class is 1,000 students.
Oh, sorry. So for proctoring, we actually divided them into small classes, and we also we also rewarded people for their efforts, meaning for invigilators, we knew it was going to be hours staring at students' faces. We divided each group into at most 50, although 25 was preferred. And we made sure that during that time, whichever invigilator, and these were our administrators in the different offices, because most of them during this period are not working as they normally would. And so proctoring was possible. I would just suggest the actual exam is not difficult to do, even if it's a few thousand. Many of the LMSs can handle that kind of class size. It was the allowing for proctoring that for me was the most difficult, and also ensuring that the system would not be stressed. Because you can imagine that if you're using Zoom or ExamSoft or your own LMS, internet outages are possible. Some of our students had 4 or 5 different people in the family using the internet at home. So we actually came up with contingency plans for them. If you're home and this happens, if it's in, even with your mobile services, you have an online Wi-Fi as well as your mobile where you can tether. And so all these things were planned, and we actually had very, very clear instructions to everyone. The last thing is we expected things to go wrong even if we planned everything. And so I actually blocked off my calendar for that whole period of the exams, and I was the ultimate technical support officer. So if anything happens, no matter what happened in the university, I knew about it and I would help them to resolve it. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Thanks, Erle. I just want to follow up with what Erle just said. As what we can see, it involves a lot of technology, a lot of effort, even a lot of manpower to vet and to invigilate the entire situation. Now, the question I want to throw to the speakers are, what about if we just do without proctored exam? Just forget about examination. Can we do that? Of course, we know there are situations which examinations are required, such as professional accreditation, such as testing on hands-on and all that. But let's retract back a little bit. Can we do without examination? Would it be more is a trust issue? The trust means is us trusting teachers trusting senior management, and outside stakeholders trusting university, or even teachers trusting students. So can we do it without? Now I'd like to invite Albert. Would you want, because I see your head shaking.
Well, it's hard. I know we have a sponsor for this conference who is a online proctoring software provider. So I should not say anything bad about it, about our online proctoring system. But my colleagues and I did look at a couple of them, and we decided, well, first, it is very expensive. And secondly, maybe we don't really want to perpetuate that kind of traditional examination, okay, by just moving it from physical examination to online. We try to convince our colleagues not to hold any end of semester traditional examination, okay? and we are 90-some% successful. Okay, we still have less than 10% of courses, okay, in which our professors would say, I must have a face-to-face traditional examination. Then of course I would not argue, because I should not be interfering with how they assess, how they conduct their courses. But I guess because of COVID-19 and all the limitations we have, teachers are very ready to explore different alternatives. Okay, so I think at the end of the day, maybe we are going to approach that, and then even if we have to keep the end of semester traditional examination, the percentage or the weight it carries would be reduced. So it will no longer be a very high stake test as it was in the past. And then in the chat box or in the Q&A, a lot of colleagues brought up questions like, can we break down say Eva brought it up again, and Amy also asked the same question. Can we break down a big authentic assessment into smaller ones? The answer is yes and no. Maybe we should start working towards those directions together, and then we will find ways out together. For authentic assessment, we can, because it is highly contextualized, if we say a presentation at school, it's just a presentation in front of your future boss. Okay, so the presentation itself can carry a certain percentage. And then after your boss gives you some feedback, the way you handle the feedback and make improvement could be another small piece. I'm just thinking about as we go along in the learning process. Of course, I'm against over-assessment. I'm not saying that for every single step you assign a grade or a small percentage. But if we can somehow modularize, okay, or break the assessment into smaller assessments, we might have a chance. But the road is still long ahead. But we need to find ways out. I'm quite reluctant to say the things as they are have to be that way. Okay, I think we are just lagging behind by a lot. It's overdue. It's overdue. Let me put it that way.
Okay, thank you, Albert. Erle, you want to say something?
Was I looking very restless? No, I was going to say that although, you know, it's very strange. The idea of cancelling exams was possible during SARS, right? So it was a very short period for us in 2013. It was only like 6 months, even though it was devastating.
Oh, I think SARS was 2003.
2003.
Sorry, yes, you're right. Sorry,
it's scary if it is a 7-year cycle.
I'm demented. I apologize. No, but no, but you know, the thing is that when it's a short period, it's okay to say let's avoid exams, etc. But COVID has already been a year, and I just finished my second round of exams. Although we actually during our circuit breaker, we encourage teachers to take exams off the table and to think of new ways to assess within the rules of our university. We still wanted to go ahead with exams, and in fact, many of our students, although a few were clamoring to have exams cancelled, most of them were happy to have exams. They just wanted authentic exams, meaning no cheating, right? And during that first round, we did have, before we took over the exams and made installed measures to ensure that there was little cheating, like proctoring, etc. We had actually 2 mass cheating incidents in the university, where one group of students just used WhatsApp to chat, and the other group sort of planned to use Telegram or something. But after that, once we did it, we managed to, considering we had 28,000 students doing exams, we only had about 100 additional cheating cases. That being said, in NUS, we have 6 cases of cheating a year in face-to-face situations. So this was horrifying to us. And this time round, thankfully, we haven't yet heard of any cheating, except for one small group that we suspect has cheated, and we are looking through the cheating. But proctoring itself has actually cut it down. So I'm not saying that, in fact, I didn't even know that the proctoring companies were our sponsors, but I mean, I actually had worked out with different proctoring companies for the first time around whether it was feasible. And I'll tell you that none of them were in Singapore. So we had no choice but to do it. But this time around, even though proctoring was available, we still opted not to do it simply because what the proctoring companies do is they identify multiple instances where students will look like they are doing something, and the poor teacher now has to go through every single video vignette again. We figured our teachers would rebel. So I would just say that I think exams are necessary, especially for something like COVID, where you know it's going to go on for a while. And although you can try other alternative assessments, in many cases, something something else will come in where you need to ensure that the students have learned. That being said, I think the final summative high stakes exam is going to be a thing of the past, and we need to move towards having our exams more authentic, more taken more seriously, so that you can actually get a sense of how the student is doing repeatedly, meaning every single exam, every single assessment counts for something rather than a final summary. I'm keeping quiet now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to shift the topic to more logistic issue. Now, we understand university can do a lot to make change and also to do our best. But the one thing that actually is not just for assessment, but also for the delivery of online teaching, which is the Wi-Fi access of our students. Now, like for instance, during examination, you could just do all these monitoring and control, but at the end, actually, the Wi-Fi just got cut off. Then how are we going to continue with the monitoring? And then when the Wi-Fi is on again, then the students would have passed 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes. So how are we going to strike at the fairness in terms of assessment and also assessment performance? So just feel free to comment, our panelists.
Well, I personally think that difficulties like these would keep emerging. You solve the Wi-Fi problem, there would be a machine breakdown problem. There would be a false alarm problems from the proctoring system. So I personally would rather look at reforming our assessment than tackling all these issues in order to continue the traditional assessment.
I would tend to agree with Albert, actually, except that, I think that we need to consider technology as a necessary evil. And so although I would push for more assessments to be divided so that there's no one high stakes exam, I think that we do need to rely on technology. And actually, that's why I'm pushing my team to design a system that we can customize where the recording continues even without Wi-Fi, and then we lock it down so that at the very end of the exam, when the student can finally get access again, you can send the recordings onto to the mainframe. So for example, even if you, like ExamSoft does a lockdown, you only download the exam, and at the end of the system, you upload it. And we can actually still, during that time, track what the students are doing. We can analyze keystrokes most of the time. So I'm trying to get my team to design something where we tie up the external webcam. And in fact, one of our groups is looking at how to develop a very simple camera that does a 360 scan of the room, looks at the screen and looks at the student and the environs. And we analyze all these things offline so that when you finally submit, it's all tight and you know what the student is doing. That being said, there are certain problems. For example, we realized that you can't use Zoom and then have the students screens on the line at the same time, because then all the other students can see what the students typing. So there's a whole bunch of problems, but it can be solved. It just takes a careful analysis. I'm happy to work with any of you if you're interested, and we can sort of share what we are trying to do and see how we can work together to solve the problem. I'm shutting myself off now. Thank you.
Sorry, Chetwyn. This is Eva here.
Hi, Eva.
I can't switch my camera on because I'm at home, so the background is a bit upset by the camera.
Upset.
I can't stop talking anymore because I am very sorry to be so vocal about this. When we talk about assessment, after 1 year of hit by COVID-19, instead of thinking about what we can do to open up the arena of assessment, as my boss has said, I'm not trying to shine his shoes or anything. After all, we talk about this together. But I'm hearing, oh, how do we deal with 1,000 people doing exam, closed book, handwritten, proctored exam? Let me ask the panel one straight question. When was the last time you closed yourself in a room, shut yourself away from all computers, all phones, and start writing without talking to your friends, without reading books, without doing anything, just writing with your feet, with your hand and your pen for 3 hours? When was the last time you did it?
I can remember 1991, the summer, when I took my comprehensive examination for my PhD.
No.
It was longer than 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. It was an exam, but that was an exam time. But when did you last do it out of an exam thing? When we have a job to do, these days the last thing we do is to shut ourselves out in a room and do not consult anything. So if we keep on saying consulting things is cheating, talking to people is cheating, this is cheating, that is cheating, we're limiting our thoughts to exam only, closed book, handwritten. Sorry, I'll shut up. I really will shut up now because this gate crashing is not.
But I think there is a big question raised in the Q&A box by Carter Lamb, which is about the digital divide or the inequality caused by technology or e-learning. Not every student has equal access to technology or e-learning, Wi-Fi access, machine access, so on and so forth. So we need to tackle that as well.
Yeah. Could I just respond to Eva's comment? I think it's a fair comment, but on one hand, we're looking at the university, we're looking at the logistics, we're looking at technology, but on the other hand, actually outside of university, there are millions of pairs of eyes look at the university. How, because of the COVID-19 even the new normal, that university can safeguard the academic standard of all programs and also of all students. I would think any dramatic change that would invite a lot of massive criticism from external stakeholders. So in a way, I would think, yes, we are facing a lot of challenges, and I don't think we've got a solution at all. But this change, I think, will take many years. Many years is not just a technical change, but also is to settle with all these expectations, all these skepticisms outside the university environment. So I guess it is a middle of the road approach that despite all these obstacles, despite all these imperfect solutions, I think we still need to go on. We can introduce change, but this change might take at least a few more years. So I throw this back to Erle and also Professor Jiang to make comments.
I completely agree with you, Chetwyn. I mean, it's if I were just acting as in my own capacity as a professor in medicine, I would say no. It's absolutely right that we cancel exams, we make everything as authentic as possible, or we redefine. But the fact is, the employers of our students are going to expect that there is a way of assessing authentically and assessing, the true standards rather than having some kind of other parameter For example, in the United Kingdom, during the outbreak of COVID, medical schools just let their students out, and there was no final exam. And although the administrators of the schools that I talked to maintained that they were very sure of the standard of their students, we all know within medical schools that students often don't get their act together until the final semester of the final year, when they start putting things together. And if you don't test them, they might have been doing well all throughout the 5 years, but in the final bit, they might still not have their thought processes right. So I still think that we need some kind of authentic assessment. Our students have been clamoring for what we call SU, which is just a pass-fail kind of grade, and they can actually just declare an unsatisfactory so that their GPAs are not affected. But we have actually fought back with the students and told them we are not allowing too many SUs, although we increased it in the last semester, because our employers will be very suspicious of all the SUs that they see when it's time to employ them. So we are actually telling our students that this protects them when it comes to competition with another university graduate. I mean, I think that it's very easy to talk about how we want to go to an easier alternative assessment, but until we really work that out, it's not possible, and we have to make the best use. So I agree with you. It's a middle ground, and it's not necessarily the perfect middle ground, but it is the best thing we can do at the moment.
Professor Chan?
Yeah, I think we should not take the assessment too seriously during the pandemic. I think an authentic assessment means that the score matches what the student have learned. But before COVID-19, the universities already have, we call it grade inflation problems. That is, give students high score than he or she does deserve. So in this kind of online learning, I think the problem is if you take it too seriously, then the problem will be more serious. So there is a question said that some universities right now does not take the assessment. Maybe every class should be just a bit pass or failed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Chan raised a very authentic issue about maintaining academic standards. It's not an easy answer to this issue. Now, I want to point the panelists to the Q&A box. There are new questions coming in, and a few of them they are more technical. So just to see whether you can give some advice. Now, the first one is, if an exam has 2 parts, if the student found cheating in part 1, are we going to fail the entire paper, or we would just say the part 1 mark will just fail you, and then the part 2 mark still valid? What's your view?
We usually fail this whole exam.
And the reason is?
The paper is no longer valid for that student.
Okay.
I think it is a character or integrity problem. So if you cheat on part 1, you may cheat on other parts.
Yeah, okay.
It's the same for us. The student who's caught cheating and it's proven to cheat fails the whole module. So in fact, the exam I was talking about, the 100 students who cheated with proctoring and where we could prove it, all of them were given 0 and they had to repeat the module.
Yeah. And then the next question is, there are various ways, there are many ways, actually many types of assessment. And then the issue is, because not all universities can afford proctoring apps or manpower and all that, then I think the majority of our panelists, including myself, the previous comment is we very much encourage using different means of assessment to replace proctored exam. it is just those project exam cannot be avoided, then we'll act on them. The next question, given exam as assessment really is big debate among teachers, I would rather give authentic assessments, case studies, and group projects. So again, that's changed the mode of assessment. Assessments is really an interesting topic. We can allot the whole next ELFA just for assessment. Yes, of course.
Yes.
The organizing committee, quite a few of them are here. So yes, we now just advise them, recommend them do that. Sorry, I'm afraid it's almost time for next session. Thank you. Well, that's from Rita. Okay, what will be a good recommendation for formative versus examination percentage for assessment? So any magic number they can give?
I'd rather not pit one against another. Examination can be for formative purposes as well. Yeah, so it's
okay.
really hard to say.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for thank you, Albert, for your comments. Now let me see. Rita told us, you know, we need to round up. So could I just invite our three panelists to just one final statement?
Yeah.
Conclude this session.
In university, we respect academic freedom. So the assessment is in professor's head. We should not involve too much. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next.
Actually, I would agree. We've tried our best to enable different ways in which the examiners the teachers teach and examine. That being said, we have come up with different ways for them to do the exams as well as teaching. And we not only enable it, but we make sure that if they do it securely. So we've tried within reason to allow for academic freedom, but there must be security in what they do as well. So I made my teams ensure that they reach out to people and that they were approachable. I think there's no one perfect solution. Even though, you know, I think that we all have very firm opinions as to what is right or wrong, but based on the fact that everyone has academic freedom, we cannot impose our will on everyone.
Yes.
So we try to just be facilitators and enablers rather than be tyrants and dictators. I think that's a very important attitude to have as administrators of a university.
Thank you. Albert?
I totally agree with what Earl just said. For me, that sentence will be, to me, teaching is a creative process. Let's be creative.
Great. Now, I don't have anything to say. I like to thank everyone's contribution, our three panelists, and also the audience. So thank you. And I know there's another session going on, so this session is closed. So have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.